So the recording has started. Maybe we can start by a quick roundtable. So who wants to present himself for starting?
Sure, I'll go first. Brandon Walton, marketing champion with François and Claudia, founder and president of Cypress Learning Solutions and Reply Intelligence. So not only do we do Salesforce consulting, but we've created some additional tools to help teams get more from their marketing stack. Learning about all of the new Marketing Cloud Next features, and I am grateful for the agentic marketing team to take time with us today and help explain some things that we are still learning.
Great. Who's next? Jacqueline. Oh,
my name is Ken Stouffer, and I'm the Director of Operations here at Cypress Learning, and I've been with the team here now for more than 6.5 years. I've been in the ecosystem for over a decade, working in Sales Cloud and account engagement in particular, but I've had exposure to and have been working in several of the clouds as well, but also Sales Cloud administrator.
Great.
And do that here as well. And also I run our sales team on the services side. So doing that here as well.
And he hand makes guitars too.
Oh, great.
Oh, wow. Very creative. You're on mute.
Bernie, you're on mute. We don't hear you.
Sorry about that. My name is Bernie Jacobs, and I basically am running the sales side on the Reply Intelligence end of it, and been with the company for about 18 months or so now. I have a background in pretty much SaaS sales for the last 15 years. Pretty much just excited to be on board right now, learn what we're going to be learning today.
Great. Jacqueline?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jacqueline. I've been with Cypress for almost 5 years now. I'm also a Salesforce admin, and I'm from Philippines.
Okay, Miss Claudia.
Yeah, hi, I'm Claudia. I am, as a Salesforce marketing champion along with Brandon and François, and co-leading the agentic marketing with François and Aaron and Timmy. Been in Salesforce consulting for about 8 years now, predominantly account engagement, and nowadays also Marketing Cloud Next.
Yeah, thank you. I am François. I'm the founder of BAMSU, a French consulting company, Salesforce partner, and I am the founder of the Agentic Marketer, which I am co-leading with Claudia, Erin, and Tammy. And today we are going to experiment a new format, which is called Pit Stop. Basically, there are a lot of questions related to Marketing Cloud Next. This is how we're going to try to call it today. And the idea of this new format is that you give us 3 questions, and in 30 minutes, we try to answer them without any fluff or slides. We just talk. We share our screens to try and explain the things and the questions. So the first question was, maybe Brandon, you want to read it, or I have it under my eyes so I can read it as well.
Yeah, I can pull. The first question that we had is François, Claudia. We'd like to have a deeper understanding of ways the unified individual can be tailored for specific MCN use cases. How can we set up custom fields on the unified individual and use them as merge values in a Marketing Cloud Next email?
Great. That is a very good question. And yeah, you're quite correct. A very common question. First, let's talk quickly about what Data Cloud is. Let's stick to a Salesforce org in which you install Data Cloud. Then all your objects inside Salesforce, standard objects, your leads, your contacts, or custom objects, are synchronized into Data Cloud into what we call data stream objects or data lake objects. Those are very similar and will quite say this is the same reality. And then those DSO, DLO are mapped into the data model object. For instance, the lead, the contacts are both mapped to the individual data model object. And the individual is what is representing a person inside the data model, the data 360 data model, which basically is harmonizing all your data. You have your leads, you have your contacts, you have your prospect, whatever represents a person is mapped to the individual, and every individual has a first name and last name and so on. And then comes the identity resolution, which creates out of similar individual a unified individual, which also creates unified individual contact point email, for instance, out of the emails. And then you have unified individual linked to their email address. And you can segment on this. You can send email to this. And basically, this is how it works. So to your point, how do you extend this? Let's say you want to add a new field to the unified individual. Well, you may have seen that the unified individual is a special beast because it is not exactly a DMO, because it is created on the fly. That is, you are giving criteria saying, for instance, I want every people with the same last name, very similar first name, and the same email address to be seen as the same people. So gather all these people into a unified individual. Now let's imagine you, for instance, have a field that you want to add to the unified individual. The way to do this is to add it to the individual DMO itself. When you do this and you run the identity resolution, which by default is run one time a day, and you can manually force it to be run up to 3 times a day, then if you add a field, if you simply add a field to the individual, then the next time unified individuals are created, your field from the individual will be created on the unified individual. You don't have anything else to do. So the question is here on that new field, how do you feed that new field with data? Well, this is simply by using the mapping. For instance, you may say on the lead I am creating. Do you have an idea of field that you'd like to add to the unified individual so far?
Policy expiration date.
Okay. So let's say you have a policy expiration date. So you created on the lead or on the contact, for instance. So from Salesforce, this information is added on the Salesforce side. Then the specific field, the specific date field is also synchronized on the lead and the contact DSO DLOs. And you will create a new field on the individual called exactly that. And you will map it from the lead and from the contact. And the next time the identity resolution will run on your unified individual, you will have that specific field added. And the value from that specific field will depend, if you have several individuals composing the unified individual, on what is called the match rule is for matching the individual. And then you have, I think the name is the reconciliation rule, in which you can say, I want, for instance, the information from, if I have a lead or a contact, I want the information from the contact, or I want the most recent information to flow into the field that will be created on the unified individual. So basically, very simple. You create fields on your DSO, DLO, and the best way to do this is to create them on the object they are in sync with from Salesforce, and then you map them to a new field into individual, and then your identity resolution, you will create that new field. Doing this, you will be able to use it directly as a segmentation criteria, because Data 360 allows you to create segments out of every information you have inside Data Cloud. And if you want to use it as a personalization string, for instance, as a merge field inside your email, or as a variation inside your email, then you need, and this is where the data graph is used, you need to add that field inside the data graph, because in the data graph you add the DMOs that you want to have access to, and the fields from that DMOs that you want to access to. And then, as in Marketing Cloud Next, you define the default data graph. Then every time you edit an email, you have access to the data graph that you've specified as the default. And then you can embed this data as a field. For instance, the expiration date field that you added can be added directly inside the email. And if there may have several values, because sometimes the individual or the unified individual is related to several records inside a simple DMO, inside the DMO, Then you can also use inside your email data from the data graph as to feed a repeater, which gives you the access to display several records inside an email, which is quite a difference from Pardot, because in Pardot you have fields, you display the field, but displaying a dynamic list of fields has always been something hard. Here, this is out of the box. So Claudia is showing us here a data graph. Maybe Claudia, you could say some words about what you're displaying on the screen.
Yeah, I was just actually like, I don't obviously have that field, the policy expiration date, Brandon, you just mentioned. I just used product interest while François was explaining. I don't know whether you guys saw that. I'm happy to repeat it, what I just did there. Let me just go a step back. But essentially, like, I went back here into my data streams. And for example, I went to the lead. And here, here are all the fields you had mapped already so far. But if you're saying now you have, for example, created a new field on the Salesforce lead object, which you want to map to the data cloud, you can come here and say add source field. And it takes a couple of seconds until and here you can see all the fields which are currently still available on the lead object, which haven't been mapped yet into data cloud. If for whatever reason you're creating a new field and you can't find it here, it's because you have to give the permission set called, I think, I can't remember the name of the permission set. François, do you know the name? I think
it's the data. Yeah, it's the data cloud Salesforce connector.
Yeah, the data cloud connector. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to give it the view also, essentially make sure that the data cloud connector can see the field you want to add in here. And I'm just going to use another field now. So let's say the priority field, right? I want to map that. That would be now your policy expiration date in that sense. Mm-hmm. So I tick that box and I save it. And then you go and map it. So you go here to review mapping. So on the left-hand side, we have the leads and the fields. And on the right-hand side, you can see how the lead fields have been mapped across different DMOs, like contact point address, email, phone, identity match, individual. So here now we want to map it to individual. So we go to unmapped. I don't have that field yet. So I will, or maybe I do, let's see. So I'm not creating a double field. No, I don't. So then I would come here and say add new field, label it. So here.
So now what this step is doing right here is adding the field to the data model object.
Right, exactly.
The individual data model.
And here you need to make sure that you make the data type field the exact same as it is from the, as it comes from the data stream. So this is just, I think, a text field.
And I noticed there is, for the folks who are Salesforce admins, there is no like pick list or multi-select list. And that's because that is just text data. And because we're not directly editing this data cloud information, there's no need to have those fields like pick lists, things like that. So it really is about the data type from a like alphanumeric perspective.
Yeah, you're completely correct. But there is a little checkbox here, enable value suggestion. And what it does is that when you are segmenting related to this field, you will be presented the possible values that your field actually has. So this is kind of a pick list, but the possible values are dynamically created and displayed when you are making your segmentation.
Cool.
So very handy, and it takes some time to for the actual suggestion to be available in the segmentation canvas.
Yeah. Then you save it. So by now, and then we save and close again the mapping here. So now, as François explained earlier, it is already available for segmentation because the relationship between the the individual is already kind of like inside the segmentation tree. If you now want to also use it for merge fields, Ken?
Yeah, if you have a question.
But if you don't mind, could you jump back into the mapping and maybe give us a little bit more insight on how you mapped that? Not how the mapping was done, that was pretty clear, but show us that you were mapping it to just one of the items on the right side. So you didn't map it to each of, like you didn't map it to the
just the individual
contact point email or anything like that, just to the individual. And can you please talk about how the objects on the right-hand side of the screen are divvied up, why we map that to the individual and not to one of the other objects there?
No, good question. So essentially, the nice thing about Marketing Cloud Next is if you first set it up and if you install the data kits, I don't know whether you've done a first setup where you pretty much just press a button and it's and data kits are being installed. It's like this actual mapping, like the dividing the fields which you have on the lead, for example, dividing into the different DMOs, contact point address, email, phone, identity match, and individual. Sorry, and lead on the bottom. That's actually done by default. Like the Data Cloud does it for you already. Like it's not that you have to do it all by hand.
Right.
Essentially, the reason it's divided up like that is this contact point. There's these contact point DMOs who are specifically serving, the purpose of and either the address details or the email details or the phone details, which are not held in the individual DMO itself, but they are specific DMO-like containers for holding these kind of information. And that's why this, these details, when you have essentially, you have these details all living on the lead object in Salesforce, but in Data Cloud, they actually separated out into multiple objects, contact objects. And
so
then
there could be an issue here then if I go through that mapping exercise. I guess one of the really important things here that I should know as a user when I'm going back and doing this mapping exercise is that if I do add a new lead field to the lead record or the contact record, and I go to map that, to make sure that I map that new details to the right DMO. I mean, like if I do add information that's related to their contact, then, well, I'm probably not going to want to map that to the individual. I'll probably want to find an appropriate, like if I decide that I'm going to start capturing a fax number for some crazy reason, right? I wouldn't map that to the individual. I'd want to map that to the contact point.
Yeah, exactly.
Contact point phone, one of the other contact point objects.
Yeah, or you could create your own contact point fax related to the unified individual, but by default, the unified individual is handling the phone, which is used for SMS and WhatsApp, is handling the address. You could have multiple addresses for a given person and individuals. This is actually the way it works, and you can have on the right side, you can add whatever DMO you want and map it to the information on the left, because a given field on the left can be mapped to several fields on distinct DMO on the right. But you're definitely correct. You need to add the field on the correct DMO you want to add this information to, and this is why we're creating here on the individual, because we know that the identity resolution will then create that new field, that specific new field on the unified individual, which will then be able to use to segment or to create other information out of it. So yeah, it's definitely really important. And you have the mapping, because sometimes the mapping and the relationship between the DMO is not really clear in people's mind. You have the mapping. The mapping is basically saying, okay, whenever a new value is added into that DSO DLO field, then I want to copy it inside that DMO, inside the DMO it is mapped to. This is very important. And then DMOs themselves have a relationship, which is completely different from the mapping. That is just saying, I can have, for instance, multiple contact point email for a given individual. And those two types of things needs to be understood, because those are completely different concepts. Is that clear in your mind, the difference between a mapping and the relationship between the DMOs?
Yep, absolutely.
Great. That is great. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, and it was more, I really want to make sure that people are clear about how those are mapped, how it goes in, where it should be mapped to, I guess, is probably the most important thing. And then, yeah, I think that it's kind of like there's a bit of a safety mechanism built in, because if I do have a doubt if I should map that new field to the contact point address to the individual, I can map it to both. Now, I am curious about using that as a fail-safe though too, and does it cause other issues with my ingestion? Does it, is it going to consume additional credits because I've got it going to two separate DMOs on the intake? Or, how should we approach that?
Well, ingestion no longer consumes any credits. Ingestion from Salesforce. You can have. That is, you can do whatever mapping you want. This will not consume any credits, but the data that will be used later on, for instance, for identity resolution or to create a calculated insight, then it will be calculated based on the number of processed rows. So this is very, very, very difficult to anticipate and very difficult to explain to. Because let's be honest, it's kind of a black box. So the best practice we could share with you regarding this is to go to the maybe Claudia, you could show us as the screen is already shared, the consumption cards, which is something you've already you must have seen already. But the consumption cards is yeah, let's see all of them. Yeah, so here you have the data user. Oh no, this is the consumption schedule. This is not the consumption cards. Maybe you don't have it in that specific instance.
It could be.
Okay, so maybe I'll share my screen.
What about a digital wallet?
Oh yeah, you can turn it on.
No.
Yeah, I think that my primary point here was just having people understand, if they're, gosh, can I be a little bit safe here with this if I'm not really sure, and are there consequences? And if we can do that with pretty low consequences, right, then we can just, it's a great instruction to be able to give somebody, if you're not quite sure, you can get by when doing it this way, and we can chat about it some other time when we talk or whatever. But at least you're not, hitting a mental roadblock thinking they're going to break something because they haven't.
And effectively, like a strategy of let's map minimal data over, just so that when we're doing calculated insights or anything else downstream, you're not paying for additional rows that aren't as valuable.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a great lesson there. Is don't just because you can map it doesn't mean that you should. Sort of like the way we talk about things, and sort of like just because you can integrate doesn't mean you should.
Yeah,
so it seems like we should treat this similarly. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and one thing you must know about the credits is that what you should fear the most is identity resolution, because there are multipliers, and for identity resolution, this is by far the activity which is consuming the most credits. Of course, it's incremental. So once it's done, and every 2 weeks, I think it's completely full refreshed. But basically, this is the thing you should witness. You should always go to the consumption cards, and from the consumption cards, you have access to the details, which is a consumption tag or insights by tag. I think this is the name. This is a new feature which gives you which specific activity has consumed which number of credits, and that is very useful. But basically, this specific thing is very try and learn, and you should always go for the simplest thing. See the actual results and the actual outcomes on your credits, and then because there are calculators out there, there are all those types of things, but I think it's quite impossible to anticipate the number of credits.
Yes, they're always working in arrears anyway, so you never get a real snapshot of today. You're always having to deal with what the last time was that Salesforce did the reporting on your credit consumption.
Yeah,
that fills all of your data, and then you realize, oh, okay. And so yeah, that's a real. So then when we're thinking about the identity resolution, that's a great point. It's you would say then, don't go for a hyper tight match, because the more things we have to try and match the more lines of data we're looking at to get that identity resolution done, right? Would you say that's why we start with something very, very simple, a first or fuzzy name and an email match, and just leave it at that?
Yeah.
The more instructions we give it, the more data it has to look through to do that resolution, and that's consuming more credits. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. That's the best way of doing it. Start small, think big, and act now. But you got to start small. Just because just because it's you simply don't know. So what you could do is use data filters, for instance, so that all your data will be ingested, but again, no credits consumed there. But the identity resolution will only run on the match on the records matching the filter, and then once you have a good idea of the matching rate and so on, you can change the filter so that you still ingest everything, but the identity resolution runs on your whole sample, not just on a short sample of your data. And then you can start adding new criteria. We've done a lot of complex things. For instance, when I started using Data Cloud, I wanted to be able to. I'm a huge fan in the emails of sub-addressing. For instance, my email address is fp@bamsu.com, but I often use fp plus something @bamsu.com. So I have a lot of email addresses that way, but I'm the same person. So you cannot just say, I want the email address to be the same. You need to change the email address so that you match specifically so that you strip the sub-addressing and you match on the resultant thing. So here you need, before the identity resolution, you need to have to use the party DMO, and then you need to use the data transform to feed that party DMO, and then the first time I used Data Cloud, I started that way, but then I started to understand, well, that's huge, that's way too complex for me to be able to anticipate the credits that will be triggered, because the data transform is triggering credits, the identity resolution too. So yeah, start small and maybe on a subset of your data, see the outcome in terms of consumption, and then try to open and have a broader sample for your data.
I love that. That's great advice. Appreciate that.
I know we're at time. Do we have maybe the ability to go through the last couple of questions?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm able to go longer. I don't know about everyone else. I just want to make sure that we're mindful of everyone's.
On my side, it's okay.
Okay.
I just, so you see this as well, like, to finalize this, like, here's like the data graph, and that's now the priority field we just added in. So you can add that in here, and once you've added in here, you can also use it as merge fields and emails. But yeah, to your point, Ken, like the data graph, the more fields you add, you cannot actually delete them anymore. That's the painful thing with the data graph. So you want to be mindful of, like, you can always add more, but you can't get rid of them, at least at this stage.
That's interesting.
So
I did not know that. So once you have this added in and mapped as one of your priority fields or one of your fields, you're stuck with it.
Your data graph field, is that what we would call it? Should we call it a data graph field on an individual, or?
Yeah, and the problem with that is that you could say, well, I'm going to create another data graph, but you have a max number of 3 data graphs, if I remember correctly, and replacing a data graph, erasing a data graph to create a new one is an absolute nightmare, because you have dependencies everywhere, and it's really hard to get rid of that. So yeah, this goes in the same way as what we were saying before. Just add what you need when you need to make a segmentation, or when you need to make a personalization inside an email, either by using it as a merge field or using it as a variation criteria. It's really important not to add things that you don't need, because you would then have a hard time then removing it.
So hot tip, if you're an implementation partner, this is how you'd want to guide your customers through. Okay, Francois, Claudia, Ken, we're just going to start out with the bare minimum fields.
Okay.
We don't want to add everything. So our implementation process is not going to be, let's sync all of these fields over just so they're there, so we have them. It's going to be very
add the whole damn thing, and then then we'll see what we use. This is not the good way. And one if I can say just this about this, one good way to do this is give me 5 segmentation that you want to make, and then give me 5 merge field that you want to use inside your emails, and then that is a good way to create an initial identity resolution and then data graph for segmentation and personalization. And then they will be able, once they understand this concept, to add new fields, in the data graph and new criteria and so on. So this is very, this structures how you create the initial data model. And it's very important to go to be humble by creating a data model, because you can go wrong ways. So yeah, do it simple from the beginning.
That's great advice. I love that.
Yeah, and I guess while we are here, just before we jump to the second question, one more thing which I ran into actually today. So you know how you have you can have different types of DMOs. You can have a profile DMO, an engagement DMO, or another type DMO. If you have engagement type DMOs, by default, so for example, this one I'm highlighting now is an engagement DMO, and you go to the filter. By default, this limit is set to 7 days. So it only by default loads up to 7 days of data. And I was like actually building a repeater email earlier, wanting to do an abandoned cart, and I couldn't see any of my data. And I learned that the reason was I had to increase it. And you can maximum put it to 30 days. So
and it's probably not also one of those things, depending on the type of, if this is an e-commerce customer, how much abandoned cart data that you're anticipating. If you're selling maybe higher end products and customers aren't going in there as regular, 30 days or a longer window would make sense. But if you're selling something where a customer is going to be boo, 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 and there's tons of data, that would be a consideration to make too, and maybe why they only go to 7 days. That's excellent feedback. All really good things to talk through as folks in the field who get asked these questions from customers to be able to guide them in the right direction.
Yeah. So what's the second question?
The second question, how do we set up dynamic segmentation in Marketing Cloud next? Please cover best practices and any gotchas. I think we've covered some really good ones with the way that identity resolution works. I think that was a big part of this. Particularly, there was something, François, on one of your posts, and it was, so there's dynamic segmentation, and then there was I think it's a newer thing that automatically replaces. And I was a little caught up in what the difference between those two were, and then what the data consumption risk is with those two features working together.
Well, there are actually, maybe there are more types than that, but there are the waterfall segments, which are mutually exclusive segments. There are the regular segments, which are the one we are going to talk right now, because they're based on the data model, and there are a lot of gotchas there. For instance, the container path, the loopback window, a lot of things which we talk. And there are the dynamic segments, and the dynamic segments are a completely different animal from the regular segment, because it works completely differently. You can, from a flow, which is called a broadcast flow, you can pass arguments to that segment. For instance, let's say you are an airline company, and you want to send an email to tell every passenger from a specific flight that this specific flight will be delayed. Then you create a broadcast flow in which you send the flight number to the segment. Then the segment builds itself by dynamically querying every customer with that specific field having that specific value. Of course, that means that the flight number needs to be related to the unified individual. And then when you trigger the flow, the first thing, the dynamic segment will be computed dynamically and injected in the flow, and then you will be able to send an email. So the dynamic segment is something completely different from the regular segments, in which you can, they are dynamic. This is what is a bit tricky to explain, because they are dynamic in the sense that every time they run, you have a different number of unified individual inside it. But let's call them the regular segments, and broadcast flow and dynamic segments are completely different animals. As it pertains to credits, well, this is the exact same thing. It's a black box. And I wish I could give you some really deep insights of, okay, whenever you are 10,000 unified individual, then this will consume 300 credits. But this is simply not possible, because it depends on too many things. So here again, just the count is consuming credits, but identity resolution is really the thing you should have an eye on. Segmentation is, I don't know, Claudia, if you share the same feeling that I have, but I've never seen someone saying, oh my God, that segmentation has consumed a lot of credits. But I've seen this for identity resolution a lot.
Yeah, I would agree.
No, I'd say like even, yeah, I also find it's a black box, but I did once, for example, Brandon as well. I don't know whether you share that, but with account engagement customers, right? I feel like generally speaking, they do have smaller databases in the B2B land than in the B2C world. So like, and I once, went through like Salesforce has this one data cloud calculator online, where I went with one of my colleagues because I was also not an expert in how to put the numbers in, how to read it all. Because what I wanted to understand if like an average B2B account engagement customer, maybe with a database of, let's say, 60,000 or so, how far they could get, with enabling foundations, how you get like a bunch of credits with foundations. And what we learned at the time, I felt like they actually it takes them pretty good, like in a pretty good direction, like with the credits available with foundations on that data size. Where you are limited at the end of the day is where your email credits are coming in, because I think you only get like, 1,000 email credits or something like that with foundations. Don't quote me on that. I can't remember right now what's included with foundations, but that's definitely something there then that they have to buy credits immediately. But I feel like just for the data consumption, for the unification and segmentation, it was actually quite okay.
Yeah, exactly. So Gotcha is not about the credits, but about the segments. And there is exactly the same thing inside products. If you're querying the same data model object, you can drag an attribute. For instance, let's say, so Claudia has already shared something on the screen. For instance, here you have the unified individual contact point address, and the country must be equal to the United States. Let's say now, Claudia, for instance, that you want to add another field related to unified individual contact point address. So, yeah, you see you have the add related attribute here, but you could also drag it directly in the canvas. But this would generate not the exact same thing, because here you are querying the same record, and that record must have the country equal to the United States, and the city must equal to San Francisco. But sometimes the attribute is not added at the right place and is added below the specific place. And so we are looking for a unified individual having one address in the United States and the other one in San Francisco. Here is the same thing, because basically San Francisco is in the United States.
Because we're using the contact point address for the individual.
Yeah. So you must gather all your attributes for the same DMO inside the same box, and not have it in two places. Otherwise, for instance, the classic mistake is on opportunity, for instance. You may want to have an opportunity with an amount higher than €1,000 or $1,000, and you want that opportunity to be closed. If you select both elements, you may not relate to the same opportunity, if that makes sense. So this is something very common, more common than one would think. So yeah, definitely something that you must care about. There is also the container path, which is something really important, because this is the way Data Cloud relates your unified individual to the value that you are actually defining in your criteria. And by default, it takes the shortest path. But sometimes this is not the correct one. This is not always the case, but sometimes this is not the correct one. Yeah. So here you just have only one, but maybe sometimes you may have more than this, and you need to change this so that you actually have the information that you are actually querying. So this is
how far down, right, the relationships are. So in this instance, I have like, it's directly related to the individual object. But if you are like, maybe let's do a minute. If you go and check out the data, similar to to the schema builder in Core, you have like when you look at the data model, and then you look at not the table but the graph. This view? It's loading. Yeah, so essentially, here when I hover over individual, you can see now that, well, most of them is also directly related. But where I was going with this is like, if you have like DMOs which are, not directly related to the individual, but it's, for example, if a DMO was from a campaign member, and then from here like here you can see, for example, campaign. Campaign that is not directly related to the individual, but via the campaign member. So you would need to have like an interim step to get to campaign.
And this is super interesting. Sorry, Claudia, I had to be, because a lot of tools that we see customers using will connect to a campaign member, for example. Like earlier today, I was having a conversation about a customer that's using Optimizely. Optimizely as a Salesforce integration that adds new leads as campaign members. And then there's the campaign member statuses and things like that. So being able to understand this, I think, is really important when you're stepping into a Marketing Cloud Next implementation where that customer has several integrations set up that are doing things on the Zoom webinars, for example, is another great example. Zoom webinars are very popular, and they have that function of adding new leads to campaign members and updating that campaign. So I think for folks using Marketing Cloud Next is really understanding how individual with campaign member works really, really well. I still have questions about the broadcasting thing, but I think rather than going down that route, I would like, if it's okay, for us to jump to the third question.
Yeah, sure.
And what we really want to see is what I'm most interested in is that dynamic content that you see in the actual email builder itself. Mm-hmm. So question 3 is, can we cover how data graphs work specifically with that email builder? How we set up, you shared how they're set up already, which was awesome. Thank you for showing that. And then how they're used in email as that dynamic content. And if specifically, I think if there are things that that data graph capability unlocks that customers can't do really well in MCE or MCAE, I think that would be really interesting information, because like Claudia alluded to earlier, a lot of the use cases that we're seeing with businesses looking to roll out Marketing Cloud Next are scenarios where they're existing Pardot or MCAE customers, and they're looking to, worst case scenario, hey, we need to be able to do these things, we're just going to cancel. And the play here is, look, there's this whole new world of Marketing Cloud Next features that are going to do a lot of really awesome stuff for you. And I think dynamic content seems like it could be one of those things that really unlocks doors that are very challenging to do in MCAE. For example, like you were showing the example of abandoned shopping cart. That's one that comes up so often. And in Pardot is always a tricky thing to set up for people or to implement.
Yeah. So in terms of dynamic content, I've just opened like a random email now. And you can essentially like go, to any of these, like any of these. Like, have you built emails in Marketing Cloud Next? So that
yep.
Okay, cool. So you just jump into like the place where you want to put your dynamic content, and you can see here, how you have this new variation popping up. So you add that in, and you go like for new variation.
And you're able to add a variation because you have created one data graph in Data Cloud. Is that true? So because that data graph you've created, we can now create variations in the emails.
Yeah, and you can have several data graphs, but in Marketing Cloud Next setup, you need to define in the customer engagement setting which data graph you want to use by default. This is very important, because if you don't, you will have only access to the unified individual fields. Here, you want to have access to everything you added inside your data graph. And again, your data graph is just a sub-part of your data model, just what you want to see. And by the way, you can inspect data graph into Data Explorer. You can open them, and you will see a JSON in which you have all the information that has been added for a given unified individual. One thing really important is that when you create an email, the version of the data graph, of the schema of the data graph that you're using is stored inside the email. And if later on you add some new fields on the data graph, you may not be able to see them, and you may sometimes have to recreate an email just to see the new value. This is something which happens a lot on the Agentic Marketer. We often have that question. I added a field on a data graph, but I don't see it on my email. Well, just create a new email and you will see it. This is very important.
You have to start from scratch basically every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just using that priority field, right? We just added in together as an example here. So you can come then here and say add condition, and then here again you have, the direct attributes are essentially what François just mentioned. These would be the attributes which live on the unified individual, which had been added onto the data graph. But if we want to actually jump down to the related attributes, and I come here, actually I should be able to have them on the unified individual anyway, but I don't. But probably the data graph hasn't refreshed yet. That's probably the reason here.
Or would that be a scenario where this would have to be a brand new created email template?
Yeah, good point. I'm just going to use something different.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So so I'm just going to use gender identity. Let's say here. So I'm going to say here, and then is equal to, let's say, for example, female. That was the value in this field. And then you can obviously like add more stuff in here. You can have any conditions or all conditions.
And then group, I'm assuming that's similar as like your completion actions and part.
Yeah, exactly.
Or within an
lists, what you can. Yeah, that's right. And then you go save that. And then you can see now it's purple, and it's essentially like here.
Okay.
I probably I didn't do a great job. That's what I'm still missing myself often. I should have written female here rather than gender. So then I could here now say, I don't know, something.
If it's a female, they're going to see this. If it's a male, they won't see this block. They'll see the block that you designate.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And then if you want to add more stuff in, you go say new variation. And then no, you would be male. Yeah, I didn't do that. I didn't do a great job. So.
No, this is super helpful. And then again, this becomes one of those things for those MCAE customers that are moving to the new builder. This is what comes up. Oh, I want to use dynamic content. We've been told, you can't use your Pardot dynamic content. You have to use this. And so they kind of move away from it. But this does a really good job of explaining when you turn on Data Cloud, when you turn on MCAN for one of these customers, the types of things that you can do with these variations. And what's cool is you're able to do it directly inside of the email. You don't have to jump to a dynamic content and jump back and forth to create that, which is awesome. And B, you can leverage anything inside of that data graph, anything inside of that data model. So you can have I'm assuming, Claudia, you can have if their last abandoned shopping cart was yesterday, you could send them a link to go back to your store or something like that, right? Or if what's one that we're looking at, Ken, if onboarding status has been onboarded in the last 7 days, go to the next step, or if they have not been onboarded at all, they have not done these onboarding steps, then you show them something else. So it's actually more powerful than the dynamic content that you're able to
it
do.
Is.
Yeah.
It is. And the dynamic content, the MCAA, is based on only the prospect fields.
Correct.
Here, you may have access to every field from all the data model you've added. But sometimes if you, for instance, in the use case you were just describing, there was an abandoned card yesterday. That may not be so easy because because the yesterday thing may not be that easy. But this is no big deal because you can always create computation under the form of formula fields, add them to, for instance, the number of days since the last abandoned card, and add this specific field inside your data graph, and then use this for the variation. But again, the data model is and asking what segmentation do you want to do and what variation and personalization you want to do inside the email is something that must be done at the scoping time, so you know what you are going to do and where you're directing your customers. Yeah.
That's great. This is getting clearer for me. I do have a follow-up question. So one of the things that's come up over the years, we've been working with Pardot for like a decade, over and over and over again, the abandoned shopping cart. So I have an online bookstore, and I want to be able to send a personalized email. If François was just on my website looking at my soccer coaching book, he's going to see an email that says, hey, here's that soccer book, here's a coupon for that soccer book, go back and buy it now. Yeah. And if Claudia is looking at my book on baseball, she's going to see the baseball. Have you had this use case in dynamic content, particularly around Now, is that around abandoned shopping cart or website engagement? How would, if it's okay, is that something that you can show us how you would walk through serving some dynamic content that says, hey, Francois, here's that product you left in your shopping cart?
Well, you need to have access to what I've seen on your website. Did I see something from the baseball or any sport? And that information must be stored must be available inside your data graph. Inside Commerce Cloud, you have predefined DMOs, which you can add already, and then use a variation based on this. I don't know if you have an example of this, maybe, Claudia, directly.
Yeah. Well, in this instance, I can show you like the dynamic content. I would just build the dynamic content based on the abandoned cart DMO. So in this instance, I'll go a step back essentially. So I have like just uploaded some random custom data as a DMO here for an abandoned shopping cart. Just going to show you what I did here. Oh no. This one. So here I have, this is just, like for a demo only, like I uploaded data. Now I created a CSV file, uploaded the data and related this, gave it the individual ID and related it back to the individual. And essentially you can see all the columns are not all relevant, but let's get rid of a couple here. And for example, here we have product name as an example. So here I have the product names, the different bars here. And then what I did in this instance, obviously, like thinking about Brandon, that you would have, you might have your e-commerce, your shopping cart connected to Data Cloud, that you get a constant stream of data inside, like what you're seeing here on the screen at the moment. And then what I did in this instance, and I built an email, or what you could do is, because I say like, sending an abandoned cart email, you wouldn't send that either, like, I guess, within minutes. I mean, it depends, right? You might send it maybe within a couple of hours, or you might send it a day later, like something along those lines, I'd say.
Hopefully.
If you then look at, I have created an email, for example, for an abandoned cart, and I've tried out that the repeater, which I've been semi-successful with, 50%. But you could think of it like, here I have, the header image is obviously having those bars, right? Because, like in this instance, someone has, forgotten the bars. But the idea what you could do here is as well, like add here dynamic content in. For example, here someone has forgotten abandoned cart backpack, let's say. I can't write in there. And you would then use the that DMO I just showed. And you say then product name.
And then you can pull the URL then from there too, yeah.
Yeah, you could do that too as well, exactly. Or I would say like, contains, for example, backpack, right? Let's say. Write that? Did I write that? Yeah.
Back. It's okay. We know what you mean.
Back. Sorry.
I don't speak. I only speak one language, Claudia. I'm lame. You guys are kicking our butts. So
I can't believe I did that wrong. Sorry.
Right. For all of us single language English folks, we're not the grammar police here. We know what you mean.
Oh God, no, this has never happened to me. Anyway, so then you put that like in like this, right? And then you could, similar to what I just showed, right? And now you would say here, you might have a different image, right? And that different image would show the backpack, let's say.
Yeah. Cool.
And so on and so forth.
And there is another approach, because in the flow, you have automation event triggered flows, and abandoned cart is predefined event. So you may say, I want to create a flow for every user that have an abandoned cart with a specific bar, to Claudia's example, and in that specific flow, you would then send an email, not a dynamic email, because inside the flow you can filter which specific abandoned product that you want to trigger the event, and then you would send the email. So you can make the variation inside the flow, saying if that product is product A, then I send this email, else I send this other email. So you can make the variation in the flow, or you can make the variation as Claudia showed us, based on the data graph directly inside the email. Both are possible depending on how you what triggers the sending of the abandoned cart email.
And that abandoned shopping cart, because I have not done much with that at all yet. You can do that outside of Commerce Cloud, or you need to be using Commerce. So you can use the abandoned shopping cart data stream to trigger that. Would that be a data cloud or a data cloud triggered flow?
That would be an automation event triggered flow, and and you would select the event abandoned cart, I think.
Okay.
And from Commerce Cloud, the mappings and everything is already created. If you have another WooCommerce, for instance, on a WordPress site, then you need to to inject that information from the CMS to the data cloud, and then map it, and then you'll be able to use it. But basically, here we are. You are seeing something very powerful, and for marketers, because it relies on data cloud, it relies on flows, it relies on variation, and it's quite difficult to explain all this to marketers who are differently tech savvy. Some are really strong, technically speaking, and can understand data cloud, and some are not. And this is something really important, to adapt yourself to what they can do, and do on their behalf what they can't, and just let them use this, or just explain them what's the data cloud. But not every marketer wants to hear about what's a unified individual, how do I add a field. Not every marketer does want this. It's the same for products. Some don't never want to hear about the sync and the connector and all those types of things. The same applies here.
Yeah, and I'd say like the version I just showed you here, you guys, is data graph obviously always depends on the unified individual, meaning that we have to wait at least 24 hours, right, before we would be able to send this email out, because only then we can rely on the unified individual being created. So if you want to do that sooner than those 24 hours, you need to find then other ways, you know, if, in case there's no unified individual created yet, like. But I'd say you don't, I wouldn't say, I mean, I'm also not an abandoned expert, far away from an expert and of any of that sort, but I'd say you could probably connect up whichever, you know, e-commerce platform you have to grab the data into Data Cloud. And then essentially, like with spring release, there's coming more types of flows, like CRM triggered flows, and like, I don't know, François, how much we spoke about that already, right? That essentially there should also be options coming for API triggered flows that you can personalize email, because as of today you can set up an on-demand flow, it's called, for an API triggered outside flow, but you're unable to grab the payload in terms of like being able to then personalize the email you want to send at the back of that. But I believe that's going to change also for
there is an Apex personalization coming. You can create an Apex class which will be used as a data source inside the email, and you would then feed using assignment that specific Apex class from the flow itself, so that you decide what you will present as a variable for personalization and variation. But it is in spring 26, and so far I did not play a lot with it. And basically, maybe this is for another session, because we are at the end of the specific session. I hope you learn one thing or two. I hope that format is interesting for everyone. We can do it again, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
This was a lot of fun, very, very informational. I really did enjoy the conversation today. Thanks very much.
Thank you. See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye-bye.